I often describe physics as the child of astrology and philosophy, and we've already talked about some of the philosophical roots, including the assumption of natural mechanisms and the assumption of knowability, both of which are fundamental both to our motivation to keep looking for solutions, as well as to the understanding of the process itself. We are looking for natural mechanisms. We're looking for mechanisms that can be explained, described, and understood. The astrology part, the other parent, comes into play in a couple of different ways. At its base, we think of the relationship between astrology and astronomy as being absolutely key to the history of physics. The location and movement of various objects in the sky was the first challenge that was really solved through direct observation and the application of mathematics. And the goal in that was to predict the future. What evolved out of that ability to predict the location of planets was things like calendars. So, by looking at the presence of certain stars in the sky, the advent of the rainy season, for example, could be predicted in advance. So the smart people figured out how to predict, at least in broad terms, what the season was going to be like, how the weather was going to change, roughly when storms were going to happen, things of that nature. And as those observations improved over time, the people who were keeping track of this became better and better and better at making various predictions. Plus, in order to figure these things out, they were fundamentally the smart people. So they would look at things and they would have good reasons or good instincts for saying the things that they said. But in order to maintain their positions of power prior to the Age of Enlightenment, they kept the mechanisms for their decision-making secret. And while this occasionally led to certain problems, such as when an astronomer failed to predict a solar eclipse, they may very well end up being executed as a result of that failure. But it fed into the mystique of the astrologers and enhanced their power in important ways and made them unique in important ways. And so they would have these underlying secret societies. After the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment, however, we came to the conclusion that everybody should learn these things, and this is why you're stuck taking a physics class in your sophomore year of college, along with many, 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 many other people who are also taking similar courses in their sophomore years of college, and for very much the same sorts of reasons. We want you now to have this knowledge. We're no longer trying to keep it to ourselves. Some of the teaching techniques that have been used historically have actually contributed more to keeping it secret than they have to keeping it, to making it widely known, but that was never the goal. That was the inadvertent effect. So that goal of being able to predict the future becomes very important. And to do that in a physics context requires us to understand causes of change and the long-term effects, or short-term effects, of objects interacting with each other. And so last week we learned about momentum as a quantity of motion. This week we're going to focus on how that quantity of motion may change as the result of interactions with other objects, as well as the equally important part of what does not change as the result of interactions with other objects. So this process of bookkeeping with momentum, in terms of looking at its changes, looking at inputs, looking at exits, is a very vital part in the ability of the sciences to make predictions about the future.